Welcome back, party people. Welcome back to our in-class lectures that we're going to be holding. This time coming to you live from my very own apartment here in Benbrook, Texas. I have no makeup on. Please forgive me, I have been out on the ranch all morning, and horses really don't care what you look like as long as you pour their breakfast in their feed buckets. So, anywho, but thankfully it is nice and warm in here. It's a little cold outside today, just saying. But, by the way, as I turn my fan off. But, anywho, let's continue on with World War II, by the way, which last time we left off with Damon. Excuse me. Dog's might be in the shot here in a minute, too, just saying. But let's continue on with where we left off in World War II, which is right after Pearl Harbor, right? We ended with the infamous speech. Don't forget, it was a 7-minute speech given by President Roosevelt, #FDR. After Pearl Harbor, 7 minutes long, short and to the point, asking Congress to declare war against the Empire of Japan. And a few days later decided, since we were already heading down the road towards entering World War II, and overall, let's kill two birds with one stone. Let's go ahead and attack this war with Germany. And ask Congress to declare war against Germany too, which, she love my cup of coffee, always. But, so here's the deal. So as we were gearing for war, which you can never get before we had Pearl Harbor, about 84-85% of the public were completely comfortable with not going to war. They were anti-war until we have Pearl Harbor. Pearl Harbor becomes the Lusitania of World War I. Pearl Harbor was the main of the Spanish-American War. It just exploded the pro-war mentality and the patriotic defense appeal of this country in terms of going to war. And all of a sudden, people were up and ready. Yeah, we hadn't wanted to fight up until this point, but now we are going, we have been personally attacked. Really is what it felt like for the first time up until this point. So we were pro-war all the way. Especially against, our Japan, or Germany, sure, but especially against the Japanese. And it's kind of sad, because unfortunately, as you see in the PowerPoint, not only do we target the Japanese in Asia, that's where half the war will be, but we're also going to, long story short, attack the Japanese in our own country. I'm going to have my hefty little phone here on my couch. Bing, 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 I went way too far ahead. But anyway, long story short, there will be, we will start to lash out against the Japanese in our own country for Pearl Harbor. Again, their only crime, which again was not a crime, by the way, but their only crime, here we go, their crime of being Japanese. They were either Japanese Americans, as in they had lived in this country long enough to become an American citizen, and or they were Japanese immigrants who were here obviously for a specific reason, living and waiting to become American citizens. There was a little over 100,000 immigrants living in the specific states of California, Idaho, Arkansas, Arizona, Utah, Colorado, and Wyoming. If you were Japanese descent of any region, American or immigrant, if you're living in these states, you'll be targeted. And so let's take a brief moment, because in class I would ask you specifically, why? Why do you think the Japanese immigrants in these states were targeted? Anybody? Nope. They were the if you look in the PowerPoint, you will see the answer, just saying. But they were the Japanese living around military bases in this country. Military bases in Wyoming, military bases in California, military bases inside Arizona. They lived amongst them. And to us, it wasn't like these Japanese had moved to California and were living in just happened to be around a military base in California, and they moved to California because they like the ocean. And they like, stay where the weather is like 72 degrees every day. No. No, if you ask us, the Japanese lived there, chosen that specifically to be next to that military base because at some point in history they were planning on bombing it or attacking it. That is where we are. In Wyoming, it's not like they love the rolling hills, the greenness. They like cold winters. It's not like let's see, where else were they? Colorado, it's not like they loved the mountains. They thought the mountains were spectacular. They wanted to live in mountainous regions. No. They were living next to military bases in Colorado, which means they had to have terrorist intentions towards this country. Just ask us, right? Just ask us. So that is where the trouble will start. So can you imagine this? These are a little over 100,000 people. You have 70. Get my numbers right here. 38,000 Japanese immigrants. 72,000 Japanese Americans get a knock at their door. My dogs are like, huh? We're going to knock at the door. You open the door, and there's someone in military uniform there. It's like, hey, how are you, Mr. or Mrs. Whoever's? How's life? How's everything going? I see little children running around. How old are they? Oh, they're sure precious. Hey, by the way, in about 3 days, we're going to be back. In about 3 days' time, we're going to come back. We're going to force you from your home. We're going to take you, with or without your will, against your will. You can either come with us or we'll force you. And or we're going to take you, we're going to take you against your will, unless you come willingly. And we're going to take you to these places we named internment camps. And you're going to be expected to live inside these internment camps. And we're going to hold you there until we decide to let you come home. So we're going to come back and we're giving you 3 days. We're being very generous here, right? We're giving you 3 days to get all of your affairs in order. If you have those cute little children, they're so precious. Find somebody to raise them because they can't come with you. Get someone to raise your children, get your affairs in order, etc., etc. 3 days from now, we will be back. We're going to take you and we'll just go on this journey together. Have a great day. Yeah, I'm thinking no, right? No, not so much. So if that was you, if you got that knock at your door, would you be there 3 days later when they came back? I sure as hell wouldn't. Hell to the no, right? So let's see, what is 110,000. 110,000 Japanese Americans / immigrants. How many of them do you think opened the doors 3 days later and said, I'm ready to go? 98%. Said I was ready to go. 98% didn't say, screw you, booked it for the hills. 98% opened the door and said, okay, I'm ready. Why in God's name would they do that? Guess what the answer is also on the next slide. They lived here for a reason. They had chosen to be in the United States for a reason. They had chosen they were going to live here for a reason. If this is what they had to do to prove their innocence, if this is what they had to do to fulfill their roles, if this is what they had to do to show their patrioticness to this country, what their now country they felt was calling them to do, to be, that was the role they were going to play. They were willing to do this to prove their patriotism, their loyalty, and their innocence to the United States. So over 100,000 of them wriggled up, taken from their homes, taken from their children, taken from their livelihoods, taken to these internment camps, which may be very, very, very clear from day one. Only day, it's on recording. Internment camps are insanely different than concentration camps, right? Tenfold. No, they're pretty much like a prison. They are a concrete prison. I've actually been, believe it or not, I will tell you some personal stories here in a little bit about concentration camps over in Europe. I've never been to an internment camp, but literally it's a prison. You are fed. You have, you're treated somewhat decently, right? Prisoners are treated well in our prison system. You get the point. It's not a concentration camp. You're treated somewhat decently. You are fed. There's no raping. There's no beating. There's no medical experiments. There's no extermination like there is in the Holocaust. You're just held. You're forced to be there. You have to work for your keep. You're not fed well, but you are fed. You're not treated well, but you're not abused. And you're just held there. You're not allowed to leave. And so over 100,000 Japanese immigrants will be forced into these camps, held against their will, and forced to work for their food and for their keep, for their only crime of, and again, not a crime, being Japanese, due to what had happened in our country previously. These people were held for 3 years. These people were not released until the end of World War II. 1945, the doors of the internment camps are opened. And all 100 say, thank you for your service to your country. Thank you for your patriotism. You're free to go home now. But it's been 3 years. Do they have a home to go home to? Do they have a job waiting on them? Do they have anything to their name and livelihood, except maybe what they have put away in the bank? Does this government, after forcing them to partake in this, does our government initially help them get back on their feet? Nope. We basically say, good luck, Godspeed to you, take care, God bless, God bless the United States, thanks for your service. And it's literally like when they came over from Japan, or wherever, they may have come over from. They get here, they have nothing to their name, they have no home, they have no say, they're obviously going to be discriminated against due to World War II. They have nothing at their disposal. I mean, they're starting from scratch. And this country does nothing to help these people. For a few years. A few years in, those who were struggling the most out of the 100,000, our government did give some assistance to, but most of them got nothing. Just had to figure it out. How to figure out where their children were. I mean, my dear God, right? It's just awful. 1988. We will finally do something. 1988, guys, 43 years after these people are released, it is decided there's still about 60,000 or so that are still living. And it's decided, 43 years later, to maybe we overreacted, maybe we took this thing a little bit too far, etc., etc. Maybe we overreacted, so maybe we should have possibly, I don't know, do something for those who went through this. So it was decided, long story short, as I'm getting a little wrapped up in my own head, it was decided to give the 60,000 remaining people a bonus check, a thank you of $20,000 for their service to their country during World War II. Don't get me wrong, $20,000 is a good chunk of change. That would change my financial situation, I'll tell you that. But is there any amount of money that can justify A, what happened to these people, B, what make up for what they went through, and C, could we not have given it to them 40 plus years ago? So, at least I guess, there is the good in that we did do something. We eventually did do something. But dear God, did it have to take 43 years? And, 20,000, there's no number that justifies what they went through. Unfairly, by the way. But, at least an internment camp wasn't nearly as horrific, chaotic, atrocious as a concentration camp. Because after, even before Pearl Harbor happens, before we do this to the Japanese in our own country, the Holocaust is in full swing. The Holocaust is absolutely in full swing over in Europe. Has been, and is absolutely reaching its height. Ooh, I'm not sitting right to do this. There we go. Okay. Thankfully, it's overcast today. Otherwise, that light would be coming through my window. Be very, very bright. Okay. So here we are to a really moving, dramatic topic that always in class gets really, really dark, really, really deep. It's kind of interesting because we usually in class have to pause. We had to pause and cut our, we reached the end of our class period halfway through the Holocaust, and on a dark note, it's like, all right, guys, go have a great day. Not the case today. So we're going to get all the way through the Holocaust, and it's mesmerizingly sad. I mean, it's mesmerizingly haunting, to be quite honest. And I've got some personal stories here from the fact that, ex-fiancé number whatever he was. I lost track of this count. I can get halfway to the aisle, can't get all the way down the aisle. Just saying. But he was ex-fiancé number 2. Was a Marine stationed in Germany. I got to go over several times and see him during that 6-year span we were together. And many, many times, we met so many people who had stories of this. It was fascinating. But, so this is a really important topic to talk about. So hopefully, even if you're not taking notes over this for a test, you at least listen, because it is important. Because the Holocaust, again, was one of the most horrific times ever in this world's history. And I'll tell you what really drives me crazy are those who claim, we've all heard, I'm sure, the conspiracy theories of the fact the Holocaust never happened. Right? All these people who claim the Holocaust never happened. I just want to beat them over the head with a baseball bat. As awful as that sounds, because I'm sorry. I've seen it with my own eyes. It happened, right? I have been to these camps. I have been to many, many places revolving around the Holocaust. Trust me, people. It happened. Overall, in the Holocaust, 11 million people lost their lives. Over an estimated or so, 6,000 of those were Jews. Excuse me for a moment. My mother is calling. Over 6 million of those were Jews. Yeah, that little over 4 point something, no, about a little over 5.1 million extra were the rest of the people we've talked about before that Hitler had problems with. It was it was homosexuals, it was Jehovah's Witnesses, it was the disabled, it was gypsies, it was, every type of other person that this racist narcissist by the name of Hitler had his own personal problem with, his own personal vendetta against. They will all face the wrath and find themselves in this thing. A little over a million people, 11.1-ish is the preferred estimation. 6 million of those Jews, the little over 5 million everybody else combined, except the other. Over 1 million of that 11 million were children. Children under the age of 14. It's just grotesque. And like we talked last time about the evolution of the persecution of the Jews, there's also an evolution to the beginning of the Holocaust too, because when the Jews in 1941 started to have the yellow Star of David sewn onto their clothing, a patch, probably right about where my patch is on my vest, on the other side, however, but so they could just be identified on sight. This, don't forget, not only happened in Germany, but every country that Hitler invaded, from Austria to Poland to Switzerland to France to Russia, etc., etc., every people they got their hands on, every country they controlled, those people would be rounded up and shipped away, right? Purifying every country of all that Jewish garbage. And I say garbage in quotes because that's Hitler's words, trust me. But there weren't all these concentration camps right off the bat. Originally, as you'll see, go through the PowerPoint. I got pretty extensive on it, but again, I have all this information because I've been there. But you'll see they started out, these people got shipped to these places that were called ghettos. They were kind of the same basis of an internment camp, as in you'd be forced to go, you'd be forced to live in this specific location, held against your will, etc., etc. And these really, but they were not prisons per se, they were neighborhood. There were houses there. There were houses and these gated-in communities that were in these horrific parts of towns. Hashtag, basically, unfortunately, what ghetto means. And all these people will be rounded up and shipped to go live in these ghettos. Be straight from your home, you can't live here anymore, you gotta go live there. But even in the beginning stages of these ghettos, they were open. As in, you could still, if you worked, if you had a job, you still had a job, and you were Jewish, which by 1941, that was hard. Even before 1941, by 1938, it was hard to have a job if you were a Jew, unfortunately. Or credited with being a Jew, right? If you did have a job, you could leave. So these ghettos were called open, which means you could leave during the day, you could go to work, your kids could go to school, but you had to come back at night. And then once you came back for the night, you couldn't leave again. You could leave long enough to make money, do your job, and kids go to school, but then you had to come home. But as we round up more people, as this continues to take a more drastic turn, the ghettos decide that having them be open gave these people way too much freedom. More freedom than they deserved, again in quotes. Because trust me, they all deserved it. But more than they deserved. And so the ghettos became closed. Then it became very internment camp, as in fact you were forced to live there and you could not leave. You were held against your will and that was going to be your life. You'd work inside of there for your living, for your food, for your housing, and that's where you would be. But again, the more countries he invades, the more people they get rounded up, the more people they get sent to these ghettos. They're just stacked on top of each other, right? They're just absolutely stacked on top of each other. There's nowhere for these people to go. And it's overcrowding, to the biggest capacity you could imagine. So we need to build other facilities, other locations to put these people in, because the ones that we have, they're overflowing. They're way too crowded. We need somewhere else to send these people. Hence, concentration camps started to be built. And we got more creative with what we were going to do to and with these people. So again, you see many, many concentration camps built. The very first concentration camp built was named Warsaw. Warsaw was the first ghetto. Dachau was the first concentration camp. So again, Warsaw, if you see what you see in the PowerPoint, Warsaw was the most famous ghetto. Dachau was the first concentration camp. I was trying to find my slide with the year it was built and opened. There we go. The construction on Dachau began in 1933. So it was before 1938 people started being put in the first one. And obviously it was such a hit. By 1938, there's all sorts of different choices to pick from. And you will have 3 different varieties of concentration camps as we move forward. You obviously have extermination, which are the most famous, I think. Everyone knows what happens there. You have labor, so extermination, labor, and medical experimentation. Now, those are your 3 different types, but you can have combined. You can have some camps be extermination and labor, or you might have some be extermination and medical experimentation. So you could have, a concentration camp that was 2 in 1, but those were your big 3 very different types: medical experimentation, labor, extermination. And again, there were so many. God, there were so many. I've been to 7 concentration camps personally myself. Which is, again, why those people who say Holocaust never happened, it was all made up. I've seen the fingernail marks in the freaking walls. Okay, trust me, it happened. That just drives me nuts. But I'll get on a soapbox if I get on that topic. So, anywho, of the 3 different types, I think we're going to go through and talk about all 3, what all 3 of them were like. But the most famous one, the most famous type, obviously, is extermination camps. Because, again, they're just the most taught. They're the most talked about, I think. The other 2 are more kind of self-explanatory until you get what type of medical experiments happened inside these camps. But again, different story. Auschwitz is probably, extermination camps are the most well-known concentration camps. And of all, there were 6. I have them listed for you in my PowerPoint. I haven't kept it in my PowerPoint. It's somewhere forward. Anyway, there were 6. You'll see their names listed in my PowerPoint. And I'm not going to test you over all 6, but you may have heard of some of them before, because there were 6 extermination camps, with the biggest, however, being Auschwitz. That is the most famous, and again, it was built in Poland, not Germany, right? Very important to keep in mind. Auschwitz, however, was a combined camp. It was not just extermination. It was extermination and labor. I've been to Auschwitz. I have personally seen it. I personally have viewed it. It was hauntingly mesmerizing. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. Get a little bit ahead of myself here. So, if you are familiar with Auschwitz, I mean, from the moment it's important to note, because I mean, all the people who are going to Auschwitz were delivered there by train. There's train tracks that run right outside the camp. And before I get into the story of Auschwitz, there was another story. So and it's very important to note that most countries throughout Europe were not aware of the Holocaust. We're not aware of the camps that have been built. We're not aware of the type of camps that were there. We're not aware of what was going on. Which, as ridiculous as that sounds, again, unless you were personally a part of it, wasn't something that Hitler was boasting about and bragging about. It wasn't something that was on the 6 o'clock nightly news or was on CNN, right? So many countries. Even, prime example, the story of Vixen and Tell happened in Italy. Italy, that started out pro-Nazi Germany on the side of Hitler. I had no idea. Most people in Italy, I'm sure the government did, most people in Italy, however, had no idea what was happening. Crazy as that sounds, true fact. And I can know this for a fact, for Experience Day number 2 and I, we drove down to Italy, we drove through Italy, my favorite place in the world I've ever been, by the way. And I've been lucky enough to be in several European countries, thankfully. See, he's an expat. He still had his advantages from time to time. But we drove through Italy, and we stopped in this little town called Stresa. And Stresa, Italy is right on the coast. A lot of Italy is interesting because depending on where you are, there's no beach. So Stresa is right on the coast of the ocean, of this bay. And if you look across the bay to land on the other side of this bay, it's not, if you look across, you're not looking into Italy, you're looking into Switzerland, which is interesting and pretty cool. You can take this ferry to Switzerland and Italy, it goes back and forth, etc., etc., which is neat. But this little town, so you hit the coast, and there are these train tracks. There's this, you go to the bay, and it's just a rock road. It's just a regular road, and then it drops down. It just cuts off, it drops down into the ocean. But right along the coast, right along the bay, are train tracks. But anyway, it's a little town, so much fun. As we're walking around, we're kind of shopping, sightseeing, this and that. We come across this one shop run by the most traditional, as you would imagine, 3 big, loud Italian women. This mom and 2 daughters, this Italian family of women, who were my favorite people I met in the entire trip. I just, oh my dear God. We still get in touch by email from time to time. Phenomenal. Love them dearly. Every night we were in stress, and we ended up in this little wine shop. Closed it down. No. But with these women, but the mother was in her 90s, sharp as a damn tack. You would have thought, I mean, she was older, but I mean, I was thinking probably she was in her 70s, maybe mid-70s, and she was 92 or 93. Still functioning, still running the store, still bright as a tack. And we're in there one night, shutting down the store with them. We're drinking our wine, blah, blah, blah. And she was, we were all talking about, what we did and this and that, and I told them that I taught. And I've been at Weatherford College 3 years, maybe 2 or 3 years. But she was asking what I did, and I was telling her what we did. And I taught history, and she got really quiet. And she asked me, "Do you teach the Holocaust?" I said, "Yes, ma'am, I sure do." And she said, "Come here, I want to show you something." And she takes me down to these train tracks. And 90 plus years old, we're talking, if this was 2000, 70 years later, yeah, over 74 years later, she still remembers this like it was yesterday. I mean, it was insane. But she would come home. She would come home from school, from college. She and her brother went to university. And they would come home, and then they would go down to the bay, and they would wait, as many other people in their town did. Because every day after they get home from university, we would grab a bite to eat, we would grab some bread and cheese. They would go down and they would wait, because every day at the same time, a train would come by, known as the talking train. I don't remember exactly how old she is. My years might be a little bit off, because she was in university, so we're say 18, 19 years old. Maybe a year or two later, but you get the point. Go with me. But she would come down, because again, every day at the same time, this train would come by. She said, at least 30 to 40 cars, like a major train. Every single car after the locomotive was a cattle car. And it was stuffed to the capacity with people. Just shoved full of people who were waiting, and all of them would have, all 30 cars shoved full of people. And they were stock cars, so they had the slants in them where you could see in, they could see out. And every car would have these people who had their arms stuck out of the sides. And, we could see their faces, we could see their eyes. And they would be waving. All these cars, all these people with their arms stuck through, waving. And these trains would come by, and they would just be, you couldn't understand what they were saying, because it was full of people from so many different locations. So many different countries, all yelling and screaming. So you couldn't distinguish what they were saying. You couldn't make out what they were, what they were trying to get across. But it was fun. It was known as the talking trains, and it was like a parade. So all these people would come down to wave at all of the people in the cars that would come by every single day. 30 to 40 cars every single day, filled to the capacity with people. Holy crap. And these, and she and her family and everyone in their town, everyone they knew who knew of the talking trains, had no blanking idea where they were going, because those were all trains full of people who were being taken to a concentration camp. They had no idea. They had absolutely no idea what was going on. They had no idea that was a possibility. They had no idea that the Holocaust was in existence. She could still remember the sounds. She could still remember people's facial features and eye color. She could still remember. She's telling me all these details, and she's crying. And it was the most chilling story, staying down there with her and listening to her tell this tale. Holy crap. So you got to remember, so many people did not know in Europe, did not know what was happening. But they knew the talking trains. Didn't know what happened to them. And what would happen is they would go to a concentration camp. Per se, the talking train would bring all these people to Auschwitz, right? So all these people being loaded. As soon as you're unloaded, obviously there's all these Nazi soldiers with guns, just in command, and they're pushing you through these gates, and they're yelling and they're hollering at you. And you go under these gates into Auschwitz. You go under these gates, and if you've there's a quote in German, which I'll butcher if I try to say it. But if you translate it into English, the quote on top of the gate going into Auschwitz reads, "Work makes one free." As in what they were doing inside that camp was freeing and purifying and ridding Europe of all this polluted garbage that needed to be taken care of. The Jews and everybody else Hitler had a problem with. Work they were doing were making them free. So you get shoved through this gate and you get taken in. And so as you're good, if you take the tour, which we thankfully had a private tour because he had connections. Again, he wasn't useless. So anyway, we were taking this private tour. And there were like 6 of us on this tour, but it was like real in depth. Anyway, so they take us down the trek that you would take if you were a Nazi. If you were a Jew being led by the Nazi army. And they take you to cell block 11, which when you hit right outside the doors is cell block 11, which is where most of the murdering happened. That is where you will be divided. Because again, don't forget, it was a labor and it was a extermination camp. So if you were seen as going to be useful for labor, the men, all the men, well I should say most 90% of the men, if you were disabled, Hitler had a problem with you, or you were elderly, you were not going to pull your weight. You would be sent to the right, you would be sent to the left. All of the men who were capable, who were going to be used for labor, would be sent to the right. As well as some of the women who were hardy enough that they were seen as they would be able to earn their keep and be used for labor. So if you were pulled out to be used for labor, you'd be put in the right line, while everyone who were most of your women and your mothers, all small children, the disabled, elderly, sickly, etc., they all went into a left line, and you were told that you would need to back up, you would get back together, but this group was going to go take a shower. They needed to get clean before going to the barracks. So can you imagine if you're an adult man and your whole family goes to the left, and you guys take one last glimpse at each other, thinking that you don't know what they're fixing to go through, but at least I'll see them in here in a minute, figure out what happened. You're never seeing him again. You're not. It's just ridiculous. If you went to the left line, this is when you would go into cell block 11. And again, you're told, your first year you're going to be stripped. You're going to strip completely naked. There is no decency here whatsoever. You strip completely naked, take off all your clothes, because they're told you're fixing to go shower. And then they take you, to the primary, their largest gas chamber is where we go in to see. And this is where it got, again, because you did not have to. You sure as hell did not have to. But if you would like to, you were allowed to step inside the gas chamber. Which, of course, we did. And so I said, I'm looking at it, or trying to look at it, as they're, telling these stories, and they're leading this tour, like you were, trying to personalize it. So as I step into this sub-block, I'm like, okay, if I were one of these people, and I was being told I was being ushered, I'm naked, I'm afraid, I'm being ushered into the cell because I'm going to take a shower. Well, I look up, my first thought is, where's the shower head? Where's the water coming from? Because all it is in this cell is it's concrete blocks, which is kind of like our classrooms at Granbury, for Granbury kids, just the blocks, the concrete blocks. But it's just a blocked wall. It's a concrete wall from floor to ceiling. There is no shower head in it. It's just this concrete room. The only thing they have on the very, very top of the middle is this very small skylight. So you walk in, you're like, well, I see the skylight, but where's the water? Like, what's going on here? And as you're, I'm sure, confused, they get as many people into this room as they can. And then, they're going to lock the door. And then what they're going to do is they have a soldier on the top of chamber. And they have these pellets. They're called Zyklon B pellets. That when these little pellets come into contact with water, right, with oxygen, they turn into this poison gas. As soon as they hit contact with air, they turn into a poison gas. So this soldier would open up the skylight, pour the pellets in, clog the skylight back. It would turn into a gas, turn into this fog, and settle over these people. And it would not take long to figure out what was happening, right? It would not take long to figure out what was going on. And this is when it gets really, really hard to justify Nazi behavior. Now, and I do say that, trust me, I get it. There's so many levels to this thing, it's not funny. 50 Shades of Grey on crack, right? Because it's like the equivalent of these Middle Eastern soldier babies who are born and who, unarmed weapons are put into their crates so they can grow up associated with it. I mean, I get the brainwashing. I understand it to a specific point. I do, but there's still human behavior. There's still human decency. We're talking about thousands and thousands of people who were taught to justify and could, as a human being, morally justify, like at Auschwitz, ushering all of these people, these naked, afraid women and these children and all these people into this room, lock the door, and then listen as the reality of what was happening kicks in, as the screaming and the cries and the sheer mortal terror you hear, and you don't care. Your job is to sit outside that door every day and you just listen to it as these people are traumatized and traumatically dying all day, every day. That is your job. But it's all for the good in Nazi Germany. I mean, I can't even wrap my head around it. But it is important to know, by the way, that a lot of those in the Nazi army also couldn't take it either. There are stories of hundreds who did leave the Nazi army, and a lot of them that did come to offer their aid to the Allied powers, come and offer their aid to American soldiers, and either joined in on our behalf or offered their services as spies. So again, it's not everybody. Trust me, I absolutely get that, and I absolutely get the whole circle of it. But still, if you just think about this, the damn decency of a human being being able to justify doing this to these people in the Holocaust, it's hard to wrap your head around. But if you go and you can look in these, you look in cell block 11, you look in these gas chambers, and you see the scratches. I mean, just the claws in the freaking concrete, and there's blood streaks on the wall, and there's still pieces of chipped fingernails, guys, in the walls. As the panic sets in, that their fight or flight, terror response kicks in, and in their last moments trying to claw themselves out of this jail cell, out of this concentration cell, right? But there was no saving grace. They could not claw out, right? And so these soldiers would keep the door locked and stand there until it was completely silent. The gas had done its job. Let the gas evaporate, etc., etc. And the doors would be open, and now you have these piles of dead, naked corpses that need to be moved out so the next group can be moved in. But of course, you're not going to touch all these people. You will go through their clothing that you forced them to take off and rob them if they had anything of wealth in their pockets. You would keep that, but you're not touching their corpses. No. So, what do? All the people who lived life, the husbands, the sons, the fathers, the brothers, even, some of the women, the sisters, the daughters, their first task to be changed into their black and white striped pajamas. It was the uniform, per se, of those inside all concentration camps, the black and white pajamas. Your first act is to go and clear out all the bodies. You just saw them walk off to the left. Now here are the corpses of your mom, your dad, your children, your brother, your sister, your grandparents, your best friend. It goes on and on. And you had to clear out the bodies and take them all into the back to this huge, massive pit, the biggest stock pond you've ever seen. And all they would do is just have, all day, just chunk these dead corpses, these dead bodies into this massive pit until it was full. And once it was full with bodies, well, then we need to get rid of it. So, we need to make room for more, right? So that they would literally just just gasoline, throw gasoline over them and continue to burn these bodies down to ash, which the smell of burning flesh, by the way, smells fantastic. Oh my God. But they would burn it down to literally it was just ash left so they could refill the pit. It's a dark topic. But if you went to an extermination camp, that would be your fate. And as weird as it is to say, it just really is an odd statement. But if you had no option, your life was that you were going to be a victim of the Holocaust. You were going to go to a camp, no ifs, ands, or buts. Good me, I had something floating in my coffee. I think it was a coffee grind, but anyway, it's freaking me out. Anywho, if this is going to be your life, if this is going to happen to you, most likely you would want to end up at a extermination camp And I only say that because for you, it would at least be over quickly. Right? It was so traumatic. Not 1 ounce of this is justifiable. Not 1 ounce of this is less horrific than any other. Please don't get me wrong. But for you, the terror and this life would be over for you quickly. While those who were in the labor camps or the medical experimentation camps lived for years, months to years. And just the sheer torture and suffering and agony they went through on a daily basis. You know, if at least for you, it's over quickly. As god awful as it is. But, because again, thousands of others didn't go to an extermination camp. Thousands of others went to one of the other two, per se, like labor. And you will see my slide in the PowerPoint, if I can even get there. I've gone so far ahead of my slides here, I have no idea where I am. Here we go. So if you go through, I scrolled past like 12 slides. Bergen-Belsen. You will see that slide in my PowerPoint. Bergen-Belsen is easily the most famous labor camp of all labor camps. It was not combined. It wasn't labor and something else. It was strictly labor. It was one of the smaller camps built. It was opened in 1943, and this is the most famous camp. I mean, if you went to labor camp, your story is pretty much black and white. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. You're taken there. The barracks are, you're forced to live in these barracks, and you work. I mean, you work from sun up to sundown in the most god-awful, horrific, extreme of conditions. Soldiers would rape the inmates of these camps all the time, on a daily basis. You would be beaten, you would be ridiculed, you would be raped, you would be assaulted. I mean, just hell. Just the biggest hell issue on earth. You would be fed the most menial morsels to keep you alive, for survival, to keep you freaking working. You would be fed. Not sanitary conditions whatsoever freaking ever. And, I mean, you would just work basically down to the bone. Literally work yourself to the bone. Might as well be, I don't honestly know where it originated from, but it could absolutely have originated from a concentration camp. For, I mean, you see the pictures you would see of these people who were legit, guys. Look it up if you don't know what I'm talking about. Legit walking skeletons. They were nothing but, I mean, their skin, they had no muscle. They had no fat. Their skin was literally stretched over. You could see all the indentation of the bone in their freaking arm. I mean, it's the Holocaust Museum up in D.C., Washington, D.C. Brilliant. Most brilliant. But that too, it's, woo. I mean, if you want if you want the Holocaust to come alive to you, not go to Europe. Holy crap. Now, we do have a Holocaust Museum over in Dallas, which is actually for where I am. It's that way. No, it's that way. But it's good. It is good. It's good. The one in DC, though, holy crap. It's phenomenal. I left there and I was like, I either need 8 mimosas right now or I need to go watch My Little Pony or both. Because, it was phenomenally done. They really showed every element of it. And there's all these pictures. And these skeletons. You go in and everyone has a bunk, right? Per se. One person per bunk was the size. You might have to fit more than that per bunk, but you get the point. It was big enough for one healthy person. You would have 3 people sleeping on a bunk, meant for one person by the end, because everyone's just walking skeletons. And there's all these pictures of these skeletons, these human beings who were skeletons. It just looks freaky. But they were openly weeping in the arms of soldiers once the Holocaust was over, which this country came in and liberated all those people into the Holocaust. The survivors weeping in the arms of these soldiers. I mean, it was just, holy crap, moving. And the babies and the children and things that you just don't think about. Anyway, it is crazy. And overcrowding is always a problem because there's no extermination. So, I mean, killing you off or you dying is nothing to them because they have more than enough people to replace you. Per se, Bergen-Belsen was meant to hold 10,000 people at a time. It held 41,000 people at a time. 4 times as many people as it was supposed to hold because there were so many people being freaking rounded up in the Holocaust. This is awful. Oh, this is awful. It's a dark topic. But anyway, this is the most famous camp. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. It's pretty self-explanatory. But this was the most known camp, labor camp, because it turns out Bergen-Belsen, where we were basically worked to death, if you're not beaten or starved or raped to death instead. But this is the most famous camp because this is the camp where Anne Frank went. Everyone assumes that maybe she went to an extermination camp or she went to Auschwitz because it's known that basically, except for her father, everybody died. They were all worked to death. They were all beaten, starved, raped to death. But it's horrific. But so Bergen-Belsen, great test question. My screen looks really blurry right now. Anyway, sorry. Great test question. Bergen-Belsen is where Anne Frank went. So labor camps, pretty straightforward. A lot of prisoners of war that were seized during World War II were sent to a labor camp, right? During their keep. But then you have medical experimentation. Medical experimentation are just a whole different beast. Now this is where it's really weird. It's weird to because there are people out there, and there is reasoning. There is scientific reasoning out there. It's just that was done. I'm trying to think about how best to word this. There was a lot of good, as weird as that is. Like, holy crap, trust me, it's so weird for me to say. There was a lot of good knowledge that came out of medical experimentation camps. There was a lot of knowledge learned that did a lot for medical research and scientific research that was taught and that was not taught. That was learned. That was discovered is what I was looking for. There we go. During the Holocaust and these medical experimentation camps. So people say, well, there was actually a lot of good that came from these medical experiment camps. There was a lot of good knowledge learned and a lot of knowledge that we discovered and blah, blah, blah. Okay, yeah, that is true. Was it necessary to get and discover all that research by those means? Holy God, no. Was it necessary to subject these people to be our human guinea pigs? Because, well, no one was volunteering to be bashed over the head or fed poison or operated on without anesthesia, without morphine, etc., painkillers. No, these people did this because, well, they deserved it because of who they were. They deserved it because Hitler didn't like them. No, oh my God. So there was a lot of good knowledge learned from these camps. We do have to admit it. Was it justifiable to get that knowledge that way? God, no. But there was a lot learned, and everything you can think of. Everything from the most simplistic experiments to medieval almost experiments to surgical experiments. I mean, everything you can think of was done. And on everybody, from elderly to, if you were disabled, well, might as well disable you some more, right? So the disabled would be sent there, elderly would be sent there, healthy, adults would be sent there, children. A lot of children ended up in medical experiment camps. And in fact, I encourage all of you to go to YouTube, look up the Mengele twins, Mengle, Mengele twins. There's a doctor named Joseph Mengele, who is the head honcho over doing experimentation on children during the Holocaust. And it is this documentary per se. The story is about 15 minutes long, but it's so worth the watch. As there was two sisters, the Mengele twins, who were subjected to a medical experimentation camp in the Holocaust and found themselves directly subjects under Joseph Mengele himself. And it's one of these girls, the one that survived. They both survived the camp, but the one who was still alive tells their story. And they were force-fed all these different types of poisons to see what these specific poisons would do to the human body. And how much would kill a human being, how much humans could be subjected to, and their bodies could still fight it off and recover from, how much did permanent damage, all of these things. I mean, so there was a lot of experimentation done with poisons just to see how the body responded and how much the human body could take and what organs were infected, impacted, etc., etc. And they ended up in one of those camps. Both sisters survived the camp. And made it to adulthood. Both got married. But then this woman who, I forget her name off the top of my head, but the one who was still alive, who was telling this story, talks about her sister got married, got pregnant, started to have children, but when she had her children, or when she was pregnant, she started to have all of these really serious health issues. And it turned out that the poisons that she was forced to take, that she was subjected to during her time in these medical experiment camps, caused her organs to quit growing. So she was in her 30s. I want to say 40s, but I don't think that can be. She was either in her 30s or 40s, having children. But long story short, let's just say, and I'm just throwing this random number out there, let's say she was 35. Her heart was the size of a 10-year-old's. Her kidneys were the size of a 10-year-old's. Her liver was the size of a 10-year-old's. Her lungs were the size of a 10-year-old's. All of her organs had stopped growing due to these poisons she was forced to ingest in the Holocaust. So her body was not able to handle pregnancy well, and her organs were not healthy enough to keep her healthy during pregnancy. And unfortunately, long story short, not giving the whole thing away, but her sister had more children, and it killed her. Because all of her organs were of a 10-year-old, 12-year-old girl's organ. Maybe this is crazy. And then the sister who was alive went on to forgive, went to go personally see some of these doctors in her later years and let them know she forgave them. I mean, it's a crazy story. Absolutely look it up. But so poison. A lot of people were subjected to poisons. Lots of children were subjected to poisons to see, again, to gain research about what to a poison did what to what body, how much you could be susceptible to, how much would kill you, how much you could recover from, if you did recover, what happened, etc., etc. But also twins. There was a huge fascination with twins. Identical twins, for that. There were experiments done on 1,500 sets of twins, aka 3,000 children. Of that 3,000, only 100 children will survive. 1,500 sets of twins, 3,000 children, 100 will survive the experimentation that's done on them. And I mean, everything you can think of, from if you bash one on the hand with a hammer, does the other cry out? Do they actually hear each other's pain? To, are these identical on the outside as they are the inside? Can you do bone, muscle, nerve transportation surgeries? Take this part of the bone out of this twin's arm, put it in the other twin's arm. Will it adapt? Will it grow back? Will it work just as well? Organ transplants on twins. Organ transplants on adult human beings without morphine. You're given just enough that they know will keep you alive, but you still feel everything, and you're awake for the whole thing. Can you imagine that? I mean, everything of the magnitude. Hitler is trying to create the perfect race, right? Create the perfect Aryan race. Children with blonde hair, blue eyes. Everything else is almost satanic to him. Brown hair, brown eyes, etc., etc. So can you set children to different types of toxins and poisons that'll change their hair color? Are there chemicals you can put in these children's eyes? Because their bodies aren't fully developed and done growing and changing yet. So can you put these chemicals in these children's eyes that'll naturally change, these chemicals will change their iris color? You have to go take their eyes and make them go from brown to blue. Can you imagine having chemical dropped in your eyes? I mean, oh my dear God. So everything of that magnitude. But also, adults were done, to see, not only bone, muscle, nerve, regrowth, transplants, surgeries, everything from the human head. How hard of a hit can the human head take? So they would literally be tied to a chair. They would come in with a 2x4 or a bat, and they would beat you in the head. See how hard of a hit caused you, or did nothing. How hard of a hit caused you to get concussion. What level concussion, the seriousness of the concussion. If you completely recovered from your concussion, how hard of a blow could the human head take before it, you start to saw signs of brain damage. I mean, everything from as simple as that to playing around with poison gases, for the good of the armed forces. Just in case you had a soldier get susceptible, or get taken prisoner, or susceptible, or got exposed, I should say, to different types of poison gases, how susceptible was the human body? Mustard gas. There were a lot of questions revolving around mustard gas. Which, if you're not familiar with that, it is a chemical element. As soon as it comes into contact with your skin, it's a third-degree burn pretty quickly. which if you ever had a burn, think about a 3rd-degree burn, and then a chemical 3rd-degree burn on top of that. But then if you inhale it, if you breathe it in, it'll burn holes in your lungs, which obviously will cause your lungs to collapse, and et cetera, et cetera. So how much mustard gas or any other type of different poisonous gas could a human being be susceptible to? I mean, all of these things, all of this knowledge that we gained for the good of medical research and the armed forces. I mean, and again, there was a lot of knowledge learned. But my God, you cannot justify the way we got it. You just can't. I'm sorry. That is not a debatable subject. But thankfully, this horrible thing called the Holocaust will come to an end. At some point, right? Eventually. And what country is responsible for the ending of the Holocaust and the liberation of all these people that were been trapped inside and been the guinea pigs all this time? Not us. Should have been us. It legitimately should have been us. We were the only big name, world power, huge country that was not physically involved in World War II yet. We were on the way. We were sending half our troops to Asia, half our troops to Europe. We could have gone anywhere, gotten involved anywhere at any point. We could have sent some of our troops over to Germany to tackle this as well. We knew the Holocaust. We knew what was happening. We knew of its existence. We knew of the people in there. We knew it was happening. We weren't physically involved yet. We could have gone anywhere. And we didn't. We went straight into war. Which is a huge issue with a lot of people still in this country. But, so we did not. It was Russia. Russia is the country responsible for the liberation of all of those people inside of those concentration camps. And Russia, God bless them, is weird to say. God bless Russians! Considering we're fixing, in the 1940s, that was a weird comment to make, considering we're fixing to get into the Cold War with them. Today, not so much. Very much God bless Russians. Don't get me wrong. God bless Russians. But it's so weird to say. I feel like that was a weird point. But anywho, it's interesting, even though we didn't end the Holocaust, and God bless them, Russia did, most of the doctors, not all, most of the doctors who were seized by Russia were brought back to the United States to face treatment, to face judicial persecution. We didn't want them over in Europe. We didn't want any chances of them getting caught. We didn't want any or getting rescued. We didn't want any, anybody taking pity on them or any type of an easier trial. You would have, there's no worse circumstance than facing your life on the line in a judicial system in a different country, right? So most of them came to the United States to face treatment. And not one of them sitting on a stand. If your life is on the line and you're in this judicial courtroom in a different country, the type of charges you're up against, I'm begging for my life, right? I am pleading for my life. I am backtracking, etc., etc. Not one of them showed remorse. Not one of them apologized for the action. They all defended their actions to the T, which was interesting. But Russia will absolutely gain all the credit for the end of the Holocaust, as well as they should. I mean, which they absolutely deserve to have, because they saved all those people inside those camps. We get highly criticized because we do not, but our focus is, again, half in Europe and half on getting straight into this war, which we will, but that's a perfect stopping spot. So World War II is 3 lectures long, so we're going to go ahead and pause here. Tomorrow I will finish up our World War II lecture, put that up for you on Canvas as well, lovely people. We'll finish up World War II tomorrow, but as for right now, that is all for today. Y'all have a lovely day. I'll see you tomorrow.